we have lots of conditions, but I'm taking one or two representative class of drugs to talk about these conditions. I'm not calling them diseases, they are conditions, they come and go. I know Dr. Zhang did a good job on pathophysiology, pharmacology, so I'm not going to repeat any of those she talked about. I'll just go into the chemistry part of the drugs, taking one or two as examples. Can you all see from the back? Hear me from the back? You should come forward. There are plenty of seats. That's what our dean says. In a faculty meeting, we do the same thing. We go sit in the back, and dean wants us to come and occupy the front seats. So I don't know what's the good thing about being in the back seat. It's in our blood. It goes in. Anyway, so the drugs used in nausea, vomiting, also covers the motion sickness, which is nausea, vomiting, constipation, and diarrhea. Here, what I would like you to do, identify the representative class of anti-nauseants and anti-emetic drugs. Anti-emetic is those who can prevent the throwing up, the vomiting. Classify the drugs into different classes based on their mechanism of action. Then distinguish the chemical structure of a representative drug from each class to which it belongs. So I'm not going to, it will be a short lecture, maybe a half hour, then I'll leave you. I can answer questions if you may have. Or if you have any questions from my part in exam 1, exam 2, I can take those questions as well. Drug targets, the pharmacology of these receptors have been talked about. NK1 receptors, 5-HTP3, serotonin receptors, dopamine receptors, cannabinoid receptors, histamine receptors. The drugs belong to, in most cases, these are antagonists of the respective receptors. Say H1 receptor, M123 receptors antagonists, such as metazine, cytosine, promethazine, or antiemetics. Whereas D2, H1 and M3 receptor antagonists, such as phenothiazine, promethazine, and prochlorothiazine, and metoclopramide, these are the antagonists of D2, H1, M3 receptors. Another class of drugs, 5-HT3 receptor antagonists, such as ondansetron. But the next receptor, these are agonists of CB1 receptors. You may have heard about cannabinoid receptors. Cannabinoid, I didn't see the pharmacology or pathophysiology of the cannabinoid receptor in nausea, vomiting. They can act as antiemetics. These are agonists. Make that distinction where the previous classes they are all antagonists. Only exception is cannabinoid receptor. Cannabinoid receptor agonists act as antiemetics. One of the examples is dronabinol. However, there is a controversy whether this is a controlled substance or not controlled substance. Even within the US, there are states saying that no, you can't prescribe dronabinol. But they are analgesics and they stimulate appetite, and therefore the dronabinol was introduced to treat HIV patients in early 90s because it stimulates appetite. Also in cancer patients, it was kind of co-discovery. These agonists can prevent the vomiting sensation when the patient is going through chemotherapy. So if the cancer patient doesn't get any relief from these antagonists, the previous class antagonists, then the patient will be put into the cannabinoid receptor agonist dronabinol. So that is a refractive treatment because the patient is not getting relief, so they will put these patients in with cannabinoid receptors. Dronabinol, is it Schedule 1, Schedule 5, or 2, 3, 5? Which one do you think dronabinol belongs to? And what's the alternate name for dronabinol? Marinol, yes. The chemical name, I'm correct. It's delta 8 tetrahydrocannabinol. Whereas delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is controlled substance. It is psychotic and you don't get prescription for that. But the dronabinol is a delta 8 THC. What happens is it goes in like a prodrug and gets metabolized to delta 9 THC inside the body. Then it can elicit all the antiemetic. Along with it, there may be psychotic activity. That's how our basketball player, she got into trouble. Dronabinol is extracted from hemp plant, and therefore it is not marijuana. So the hemp oil is the one she had it in the bag when she checked in, when they accused her of kind of using controlled substance. They say dronabinol is not federally, it is not a Schedule 1 drug. It is not controlled. Therefore, federally it is accepted, but states have their own, some states have their own rule, they restrict. But this person didn't know, Russia doesn't know about this, probably distinction between delta 9 THC, delta 8 THC, so they put her in jail. So it is an unfair treatment for our basketball player. Anyway, it's so these only the agonists of this receptor, they act like an anti-emetics.
So dronabinol is a delta 8 THC?
Yes, it is alternate. Its alternate name is delta 8 THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. I'm sure these classes have been covered. Their pharmacology is histamine antagonist, methylzine, cyclizine, promethazine, dopamine antagonist, phenothiazine, metoclopramide, then serotonin antagonist, ondansetron, then NK1 receptor antagonist, epipetant, and rolapitant. These have been covered, and I'm going to try give you the chemistry part of these respective drugs. So the cyclizine and the methylzine belong to the class of piperazines. These are histamine antagonists, and they have a piperazine ring structures, and they have some variations in the substitution where R1 and R2 are modified to give you cyclizine and methylzine. In case of cyclizine, the R1 here is just an H atom, whereas the R2 is substituted with a methyl. Whereas in methylzine, R1 is a chloride, and then the R2 is a methyl benzene. So added a methyl benzene, increase its hydrophobicity, increase its aromaticity, becomes more aromatic. These two have been widely used to treat motion sickness, nausea, vomiting, because of their central effects mediated via H1 receptors. By putting these dimethyl this in R2, it probably increased its hydrophobicity. As I said, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. Another class of histamine antagonists, but these are tricyclics. Remember tricyclic H1 antihistamines? They have 3 ring structures, and there is a S atom in it, and it is the S enantiomers. So it is a mixture of R and S. So it is a racemic mixture, and it is an antiemetic. Of course, it is the most effective agent for treatment of motion sickness. Again, it makes it more specific to H1 receptors, the tricyclic nature. Then there are tricyclic compounds, which are D2 receptor antagonists. And they are for example, phenothiazine. Phenothiazine is a benzodiazepine type 1 compound. And there are other examples, prochlorperazine. They are all related to the tricyclic compound. There is an exception here, metoclopramide. It is not a tricyclic, but it acts through, apart from the dopamine receptors, it blocks 5-HT4 and may sensitize M3 receptors of the muscle. See, the metoclopramide doesn't have a tricyclic nature, a 3-ring structure, but it is a para-amino benzoic acid derivative. So this is if you have COOH and NH2, it is the para-amino benzoic acid. With other substitutions to the carboxyl group, they made this compound, and it's very effective in treating nausea, vomiting. And how does it act? It acts by increasing the GI motility. And also there are some say it increases the LES tone. Remember the LES, lower esophageal sphincter? You have come across on it in GERD. When people talk about GERD, they reflux. Because of the LES tone, if it becomes weaker, then the reflux of acid reflux occurs. It is at the lower end of the esophageal, that's where it acts like a flap. It closes the stomach acid from coming back to the mouth. So that is by increasing the tone of the LES, it makes it a tight lid. So it would not allow the vomit to come out. So that is, this compound increases the LES tone, thereby contains the vomit within the stomach. It won't allow it to come out. That's another mechanism of action for metoclopramide. And the next class is serotonin receptor antagonists. And there, ondansetron, zafran is the 5-HT3 specific or preferential to 5-HT3 receptors. It is modified from cocaine structure. And this compound belongs to a group called keto compounds because of the carbonyl nature present in this carbonyl groups. This will make the ketone functional groups. Some of the newer drugs in this group are granisetron, dolusetron, they all belong to this class, the aryl piperazine class. In ondansetron, what they did, they left this imidazole group at the terminal, and it is a heterocyclic amine, and being there, it can make the specific to 5-HTP3 receptors. Now we have NK1 receptor antagonists. These are the neurokinin 1 receptor antagonists. They are shown to inhibit vomit via central pathway. These NK1 substance B, NK1 receptors are centrally located, and the examples are aprepitant and rolapitant. These are active drugs. They are coming from the fosaprepitant, which is a prodrug. So you take this fosaprepitant, becomes aprepitant, the active drug. So they undergoes metabolism to give you the product aprepitant, and then you don't need to know this long complex name. Just say this is aprepitant is an active drug of fosaprepitant. And you don't need to know what modifications it undergoes, just know the name. Then the cannabinoid receptor agonists. The dronabinol, it is derivative or closely related compound to delta 9 THC. It is a delta 8 THC. This has a pentyl group, side chain, and it is highly lipid soluble. It undergoes metabolism into an active compound called delta 9, 11-hydroxy delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. That is the active compound. This compound, it has both psychotic functions besides this anti-emetic nature. So this is only an alternate treatment for when the patient is not showing any response to other antagonists we talked about. MOA is not clearly understood. It may affect the vomiting center in the brain. That is the speculation. Dronabinol has complex CNS effects, therefore one has to be careful to prescribe this. As I said, it only comes a last resort for the chemotherapy patients who are not getting any relief of emesis by other antagonists. Now we're going to talk about a little bit on drugs for constipation. Constipation is induced by opioid treatment too. There is OIC, they say, is an opioid-induced constipation. Anybody who undergoes surgery, post-surgery time, they will have this condition too. And now, there are certain people have a constipation, chronic condition, then they can use these laxatives. One of the laxatives which I like to talk about, the chemistry of lactulose. You all had carbohydrate chemistry in your P1. Remember, galactose and glucose units make the lactose disaccharide. whereas this one is lactulose. If it is a lactose, they can break down glucose and galactose, and that goes into energy metabolism. But by adding galactose to fructose, they synthetically created this molecule, a disaccharide, which our enzymes cannot metabolize. These, they are called disaccharidases. That's the one, these enzymes are the ones acting on sucrose, or lactose. They break it down into individual monosaccharides, whereas this enzyme is not able to break down lactulose. So lactulose stays in the system, and that becomes a non-absorbable carbohydrate. Therefore, it can relieve constipation condition. The opposite of constipation is diarrhea. Then diarrhea can be treated with any bulk forming hygroscopic agents, carboxymethylcellulose, calcium, polycarbophyl, etc. But the effective treatment is from the opioid derivative loperamide, Imodium. And then the others, diphenoxylate and diphenoxin. For diphenoxylate is the prodrug which gets metabolized to diphenoxin, becomes the active drug. I have highlighted at the bottom. Now, opioids have inherent abuse potential. So the loperamide was a slight variation of opioid structure by making this butyryl group in here, butyramide group. It makes the compound compound inaccessible to brain because it cannot pass the blood-brain barrier, like morphine. Morphine can pass the blood-brain barrier, whereas this one cannot because of the butyramide derivatization or functional modification. Therefore, it becomes effective in treating diarrhea than the counterpart typophenoxylate. It's PH, it's not PE. So diphenoxylate is a phenyl piperidine derivative, and it is a prodrug, and it is rapidly metabolized to diphenoxin, and that is the one acting and preventing the diarrhea by binding to the new receptors of the peripheral, not in the central. So this has less abuse potential because it does not cross the blood-brain barrier, unlike morphine. But we do have, I'm going to pick on your brain a little bit on this slide. We do have natural opioids in our system. What are those natural opioids? Anyone? I know in biochem we didn't touch on this, but did you come across any of the natural opioids in your PODA? 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry?
She said meal.
That's a new receptor. But what are the agonists, natural agonists, opioids, our body synthesizes? Our body synthesizes natural agonists, opioid-like molecules, which can bind to all 3, 4 delta, kappa, now mu receptors, subtypes. These are naturally occurring opioids. can we get relief if we have opioid, naturally occurring opioids, can we get relief? They can control diarrhea conditions, can they? Because they will induce constipation, say the other end of the spectrum. So what are these naturally occurring opioids? You heard of these enkephalins, endorphins? These are the naturally occurring opioids. Of course, they are peptides. These are peptide agonists. They bind to opioid receptors and they induce the same, whatever the morphine induces. They can be analgesics, they act like painkillers. And if we increase these natural opioids, we can control diarrhea. That was the logic behind these peptides. Enkephalins are proteols, however, their action is short-lived because these are peptides. What happens to a peptide? It gets proteolytically cleaved by enzymes in our system. So therefore, these enkephalins, endorphins are produced, but they are transiently act on these respective receptors. They produce the analgesic effects, painkiller effect, and they are gone because of the enzyme enkephalinase. So if we design a drug to inhibit this enkephalinase, we can increase the durability of these enkephalins. They stay longer and they they can control the diarrhea condition. In Europe, they have these drugs which are enkephalinase inhibitors, but in the US they are not approved for clinical treatment. So by inhibiting this enzyme activity, one can control diarrhea by increasing these natural products. Opioids stay there for a longer time period so that they can bind to new receptors. These are acetaminophen. It is a prodrug of thiophen. So thiophen is a thiol group, and enkephalinase, they have a zinc molecule in their active site. Remember the chelation? It is the other way around. So instead of the antacid, the divalent cations coming in bind to antibiotics. Here, the thiophen is the molecule, drug molecule has a thiol group which can go bind to the zinc in the enkephalinase active site and thereby makes a covalent inhibition, covalent binding, and inhibits this enzyme, thereby giving the enkephalins for a longer time period, they are stable so that people can get natural opioids produced in the system and they can control diarrhea. These enkephalins and endorphins, remember there is it's in the next slide, there is a runner's high. Have you heard of runner's high? That's what it is. When you're running the first mile, everyone gets tired. If you sustain, if you have endurance to pass that 1 mile, then you can keep on going. It is because the enkephalins and endorphins are produced in our body. They will inhibit the pain receptors, so the runner cannot feel the pain, and they keep going. That's what the runner's high is, and that endorphin, I'll come to that in the next slide. So that is how these natural opioids are produced. Yeah, these 2 slides, I have 3. Actually, I put them in here just to pick on your brain, just activate it. So there are other alternatives for the treatment, antiemetics, by blocking the degradation of these peptides. I can replace that slide from PowerPoint with this, but I cannot give you any questions on this because there is no, these drugs are not approved by US FDA, so I'm not supposed to ask you questions on that. But this will be something take-home message for you when you are rotating. There may be questions your preceptors may ask, and that will prepare you for the unexpected. Okay, so the proenkephalin, these are small peptides. Two kinds of enkephalins are there, and whereas the endorphins, they are a little longer. They are 16 MERS, we say 16 amino acid containing peptides. You don't need to know any of this details, but the endorphins are the ones protecting the runners from pain effects. So the marathoners, they will start producing endorphins, and that they will not feel the pain to some extent. Okay, I'm not saying they'll be out of. Have you anybody ran marathon before or planning on running? You will know what I'm talking about. I have done several Houston marathons, and I know it's a 20 miler, you say that you hit the wall. That's exactly true. When you're coming back on the what is that, the Allen Parkway, where it passes through, that is the 20-mile marker. You feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna stop, I cannot run. So that's how you feel. And there, your endorphins and enkephalins will protect you from that pain and make you run. Okay? So by avoiding their degradation, by inhibiting the enzymes, the proteolytic enzymes, you can provide relief for these patients' diarrhea condition. Okay? That's all I was trying to say. That's all I have. So your chemistry, just focus on the antihistamine antagonist, the dopamine receptor antagonist, and then the other one, opioid receptor antagonist, and the cannabinoid receptor agonist, dronabinol. I may have 4 or 5 questions in this. That's why I have to distribute these questions uniformly. Okay. Are there any questions?
Is that it's not in the U.S. that drug that you talked about?
Yeah, the U.S. FDA hasn't approved for some reason. I don't know.
Okay.
But in Europe, these drugs are in use. They are approved.
What are the side effects? Side effects?
I'm not so sure. Enkephalins, they are so specific for enkephalins. So the enkephalinase does not act on any other peptides, to my knowledge, but FDA may know there are some targets these enkephalinase are required. If we block their activity, it may impair somewhere else. So that, but Europe has gone ahead, approved it. So we don't know why FDA hasn't done it, not to my knowledge. Anything else? If not, last exam 2, I think you all did pretty good. My section, I didn't see any, I looked into item analysis. That's what I'm talking about. Unless if you have a specific question in my section, I will stop by after this. you can come and check with me. And then we'll go from there. So your exam 3 is coming after the spring break, so you have time to prepare and have a nice break and a safe break rather. That should and behave yourself